when I was 17, on my way to being 18 and graduating high school, the folks that I was running with in the mission weren't always they didn't always make the greatest choices, let's just say that. But in a lot of, in gangs or just folks who are in impoverished or in certain neighborhoods growing up, they either don't have a lot of support or money or sometimes both. So one of the gals that I was really cool with at the time, she was prostituting herself, which is common amongst young individuals, especially women during that time who are involved in gangs or are part of families or friends that are involved. So one day she calls me, and I'm in Oakland at this time with one of my friends, and she says, "Hey, I gotta ask you something, Hav." And I'm like, "What's up?" And she says, "Would you be my pimp?" And I started chuckling. I was like, "What?" I was like, "No, because then I gotta get a car, I gotta get a gun, I gotta protect you, I can't do all that, I got too much things going on, I'm trying to graduate." So it wasn't feasible. And then I said, "Well, it doesn't matter because I'm bisexual, so that wouldn't work." I don't know why I said I was bisexual and why that came up in that certain situation. It was bizarre. But then she pauses for a second and she says, "Well, I got guys that you can pimp out too." And I was like, "That's not the point. I'm not interested in pimping out anybody. I don't even know." So that was the transition. I didn't fully come out to saying that I was gay. Bisexuality is a way to kind of transition into a place where you're kind of looked at differently, but you're kind of like that in between, and that for some reason made it a little bit easier for me to say. And that was the first person that I came out to, and I'm not sure why. I think I just felt comfortable with her in that point in time, and I was also in a comfortable space. I was at my best friend's house, and he wasn't there, so he didn't hear. But then after that, she said, "Well, I have somebody for you," and that was the first transition to me actually finding a partner. It took about like a half a year for us to actually meet, but once we did meet, we spent 3.5 years together, which was pretty awesome. As a teenager, it was a little bit more complicated. When I was in 6th grade through 8th grade, there was a situation in 6th grade, and I acted with a little bit flamboyancy, meaning that it was a little bit more feminine, my character. And when I did that, a couple of my friends looked at me and they called me a faggot, and I didn't really know what that was. And at that point, I kind of took a step back and I was like, what does that even mean? And ever since that point in time, the names got worse. The names of like gay, sissy boy, queer, all these names were being thrown around. And for those 3 years, I really didn't understand what they really meant. So transitioning from 8th grade to high school, I was born and raised in the Mission District in San Francisco, which is predominantly Latino population. So a lot of my cousins and a couple of my friends were associated or in gangs. So I decided to associate myself with them. It gave me a sense of protection. It gave me a sense of identity, but at the same time hiding a different identity that I had. So in our culture, when we look at individuals in gangs, we see machismos, or we see individuals that are very strong, and they're not to be messed with and they're to be feared. So I wanted to take on their persona because I didn't want to be ridiculed or beat up or called names anymore. So as soon as I hit high school, I was a very different person. So my teenage years throughout high school, where I had girlfriends, I was hanging out with really cool people, at least I thought they were cool, and I enjoyed it for the most part. But it was hard waking up every morning recognizing that I had something to say to somebody or to people, and I couldn't say it because in fear of being made fun of, ridiculed, bullied, and hurt. And at times, the images that you see in the mass media is being killed, being beat up to a point where you don't even want to think about that identity or that part of you. So, my sister's a year and a half older than I was. than I am. And it was really difficult because I didn't really go to anybody, because I thought that if I told anybody, then I would start to expose myself. So I kept most of it hidden. My sister backed me up when it got really bad. There was an individual that was 2 grades higher than I was, and they would be so ruthless in the way that they would verbally abuse me. And one day, and this is the most bizarre part, is my mom comes to pick me up. And as we're driving down and we're leaving, we get to a stop sign. And at the corner is our church. And on the church, there's like steps. And then there's like 2 little rails that people can be, hanging out on. And the guy that was there that's always, giving me shit looks, and he sees me. My window's down. And he starts cussing. He starts saying all these foul things. And my mom is right there. And I was like, oh God, this is the first time that my mom is like experiencing this. This is so weird. And then my mom looks over and she's like, she starts like yelling at him, like, what the hell is your problem? She was about to get out of the car and I was like, Mom, just keep going, please. Just keep going, just keep going. So as we were driving away, she's like, what's that kid's name? Blah, 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 blah. And so I told him his name, and she called the police. And the police went over to his house and spoke with him and his parents. And the police came back and said, oh, well, he said that's just how they play. That's how they, they're friends. That's how they talk to each other. So it's like, not once did the police officer even ask if that was my friend, if I identified as a friend with him. And so it was just kind of like washed off. It was nothing. And I think still to this day, harassment in that way is still not very much enforced, especially in law enforcement. They take it very. There are individuals that step up to the plate and try to make change. That's for sure. But there's a systemic issue with our justice system in so many ways, not just with harassment. It's across the line in so many ways. Yes, there's support everywhere. I mean, you have to find a network, a community of folks that really understand you. Positive Images is one of the only fully focused on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer youth in Sonoma County. So if folks are struggling here in Sonoma County, it's definitely an opportunity to find a community, a space, a group, a support that otherwise you wouldn't have at schools or in your family. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to do it in schools. I know that a lot of schools have GSAs or queer student unions, and sometimes those are not the safest places that they want to come out at, because then somebody could see them walking into a certain room, and that could be kind of a place where they don't want to expose themselves. But Positive Images is a place where it's very confidential. There's no exposure of who you are outside of the room that we all meet in. And there are both counselors, MFTs, adult volunteers, a lot of support there for anybody that's struggling with what they're going through. Another support would be just finding somebody in your family that you've heard or might be really open to having that conversation and keeping that confidential, and connecting with them so that you can have a leeway. So if you haven't exposed yourself to your parents, or if you haven't created that step, at least you have an ally within your family ready to kind of have your back when you need them.
I'm Marisol Cornejo.
I'm Rocio Carranza.
And I'm Luis Perez.
Hi, my name is Carla Ayala.
My name is Christian Campos.
I'm Lucy Palacios.
And it's Fabricio Rango.